This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details. Ever since the Pokémon series arrived on Nintendo Switch, it's been an unending barrage of complaints about graphics. From the trees in Sword and Shield to the landscapes of Legends Arceus, folks haven't been impressed with the visuals of the HD Pokémon games, and there's some fairness to that. But I want to get off on the right foot right from the get-go. I hate the phrase lazy developers being used as an argument as to why a game looks the way it does, particularly in the case of Pokémon. I feel this way for two reasons. Firstly, because it's so often used as an excuse to completely ignore legitimate artistic intent. And secondly, because it implies that the Pokémon company itself just has no control over the folks who make Pokémon games. That the developers just show up whenever they want, make a crappy-looking tree, and when anyone tries to suggest that they make a better tree, they just ignore them and go home. That's not how a job works, especially a job working on the highest-grossing media franchise in history. Hey everybody, I'm John Reardon, you're watching NWR TV, and this is the real reason why Pokémon games aren't that pretty. By the way, throughout this video, I'll be referring to Arceus as Arceus, not Arceus, or Arceus, or any of those, not because I think they're wrong. My way of saying it might be wrong, I don't know, but when I went to check, the Pokemon community seems a bit divisive over it. So this is the way I've always said it. I apologize if it offends your ears. Thanks for sticking it out. At last count, the Pokemon franchise had achieved a revenue of approximately $109 billion. The video games alone make up over $24 billion. For reference, the next highest grossing franchise is Hello Kitty at $88.5 billion. Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe are a bit further down on the list at $69 billion and $36 billion respectively. All of this to say that if the Pokemon Company wanted a better tree model, they could afford to pay someone to make one, and any lazy developers would simply be fired. But the Great Tree debacle is kind of old news at this point. Let's get to something a little more current. Pokemon Legends Arceus looks to be a bold step forward for the series. Brand new gameplay mechanics look to reinvent what Pokemon has always been. The marketing isn't shy about trying to stir up comparisons with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which from a marketing standpoint is a good idea. What we know about the gameplay seems to take some cues from Monster Hunter. But when we actually compare Arceus on a visual level to either of these, it doesn't exactly come out favorably. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about the art design itself. The cel-shaded characters are well designed and the world itself is pleasing on an underlying design level. But the technical execution of that art leaves a lot to be desired. There are two avenues to approach this from. One is a technical look at what exactly is falling short, and the second is to question why it's in the state it's in. After all, as the highest grossing media franchise of all time, one would think that Pokemon has no excuse not to be one of, if not the best looking games on the system. Let's start on the technical side of things. I don't want to get too nitty-gritty here, but I'll quickly run through some things that stick out to me in what we've seen of Pokemon Legends Arceus. Firstly, the image often seems to run at a sub-1080p resolution. This isn't itself a huge problem on Switch, however the image is also extremely raw. There are no signs of anti-aliasing to smooth out the rough edges, making the resolution itself pretty evident. Foliage, specifically grass, doesn't cast shadows or feature any sort of ambient occlusion to fill in shadow at its base, which removes any sort of depth and makes grassy areas seem kinda muddy. Compare it to the grass in something like Xenoblade, and you get what I mean. Draw distance on foliage is also very near to the camera, and distant parts of the map are entirely devoid of any details and present the underlying mesh of the world in a very raw state. Materials in general are just extremely simple, and they don't seem to react to any light sources beyond just the sun. Combined with low texture resolution and the aforementioned lack of ambient occlusion, the entire image is just sort of flat. The overall look they seem to be going for isn't that far off from Monster Hunter Stories 2 or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but without any of the little bits of technical polish that either of those games employ. What's interesting is that despite the Switch being a significantly lower powered machine than the other major systems, all these issues could indeed be addressed. It's not beyond the power of the platform itself to have Pokémon games that look absolutely incredible, so why don't they? Well, the simple answer is they don't have time. Since Breath of the Wild is a pretty regular comparison point for Arceus, let's start there. We know that Breath of the Wild entered development immediately after the wrap of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. For the sake of argument, let's assume that the team got a break after the launch of Skyward Sword in November of 2011, and that Breath of the Wild went gold a couple of months before it launched, in order to leave time for actually, printing copies of the game. So we'll call the development time January of 2012 to January of 2017. That's 5 years from pre-production to finished game. It had a staff of as many as 300 people by the end of production, plus around 100 staff members from Monolith, the developers behind the Xenoblade series, who were brought in toward the end of production, and also, according to our sources, helped with the game's engine itself. Now let's compare that to recent Pokémon titles. Of course, we do need to be careful when determining development times for Pokémon games, as while they may all fall under the Pokémon Company banner, the mainline Pokémon RPGs are technically no longer developed by a single company. While Pokémon Sword and Shield were developed by Game Freak, the name many of you associate with Pokémon games, Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were developed by Ilka. More on them later. Game Freak is the team behind what you would generally think of as those mainline Pokémon RPGs. Prior to Pokémon Legends Arceus, their previous game was Pokémon Sword and Shield, which was released in November of 2019. At that point, the team was split in two, so that one half could continue to work on Sword and Shield in the form of its 2 DLCs, while the other began work on what would become Legends Arceus. In October of 2020, the final DLC for Sword and Shield was released, meaning the Game Freak Pokémon team could reunite and be back up to full power. At its peak, Pokémon Sword and Shield was being worked on by about 400 people across Game Freak and the Pokémon Company itself, about the same number as Breath of the Wild. With Legends Arceus releasing at the end of January 2022, and taking into account production time along with a short break after Sword and Shield, we can conclude that Pokémon Legends Arceus has a development time of about 2 years. That's an outrageously short development time for a AAA, HD, 3D JRPG in a huge franchise, but it's actually a pretty lengthy development time for a Pokémon game. For the past 20 years, Pokémon has been an annual series, with games released every year. There have been a couple of off years throughout the series' history, but by and large, Game Freak has arrived with a Pokémon RPG every single year. The use of remakes that reuse previous engines and some asset, along with third games in a generation, allowed for smaller teams to work on these filler titles, while the main team worked on the next big release. However, in the modern age of HD graphics and expansive 3D worlds, this just isn't realistic anymore. And that's likely why we saw Ilka develop the Diamond and Pearl remakes. But let's talk about the development of those two games. Now, while I personally think they look like a nice visual update while maintaining elements of the original art style, they got plenty of flack for their visuals as well, not to mention a litany of bugs and technical issues. Ilka was also the developer behind Pokémon Home, which was released in February of 2020. So assuming the team at Ilka moved immediately from Home to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which was released in November of 2021, that would mean they likely had less than 20 months from start to finish to produce those games. Take into account what was likely a short break after Home finished, and the time to print game cartridges for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and I think a more realistic number is 16 to 18 months. That's unheard of in modern AAA games. Yes, these are remakes of existing games, but they're not using any of the assets from those original releases, and likely almost none of the code. Keep in mind that other examples of annual series maintain multiple full-size development teams so that each one has several years to work on their next game before their turn comes up again in rotation. Pokémon hasn't done that, and is only just now starting to show some signs of realizing they may need to. Now, of course, there are other issues at play. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild benefited from a lot of technical work Monolith was doing for Xenoblade Chronicles X. Some of the early actual gameplay of Breath of the Wild looks a bit more like Legends Arceus, but that's the thing. That was early gameplay. When Breath of the Wild needed more time, it was delayed, and then it was delayed again. Even Breath of the Wild's sequel, which reuses the same engine and seemingly some of the map and plenty of assets from the previous game, it'll still have been in development for 5 years, assuming it really does come out in 2022, which, based on Zelda series history, seems unlikely, but fingers crossed. But the Pokémon Company does not delay games. They aim to release a new Pokémon game every year, and that comes with consequences. This isn't even taking into account new engines and moving to an entirely new platform. So you want to know why HD Pokémon games haven't looked very pretty? Because they're rushed to meet an impossible expectation of these games continuing to be annual while being developed by a single developer. Pokémon isn't just a video game series either. Each game is tied with the anime, the card game, and plenty of other merchandise. Delaying a Pokémon RPG is a logistical nightmare, and that's why you may notice that they never get delayed. For better or worse, Pokémon always releases on time. ILCA being brought in to work on a remake is perhaps a sign that the Pokémon Company sees the issue, but even then, ILCA appears to have only been given, at best 18 months to develop a game? This isn't about developers being lazy, it's about maintaining an unrealistic standard. If Pokémon was given the development time of something like Zelda, imagine the results we could see. Honestly, Legends Arceus being in the state it appears to be in after only 2 years of development is actually really impressive, but it could be so much better. However, the only way this can change is to move Pokémon off an annual release schedule or bring on additional teams to work independently on a rotating release schedule. But that would mean taking new mainline Pokémon games out of the hands of Game Freak, a prospect that would likely concern both the Pokémon Company and fans. The Pokémon Company is at a crossroad. Do they spread out releases in hopes of improving quality, or risk diluting the series by spreading development out across more companies? The honest truth is that graphical quality doesn't seem to have really hurt their sales numbers just yet. You can complain about graphics or the incomplete Pokédex or various other nuances, but at the end of the day, the games are selling. More realistically, the question for the Pokémon Company is, can Game Freak keep up with demand? And I think the answer to that is pretty clearly no. And once again, that isn't because Game Freak is lazy, it's because they're being given an impossible task. Simply spreading releases out to every 2 years isn't going to be enough. In other words, if you think Pokémon Legends Arceus looks kinda ugly, don't blame it on lazy developers. Blame it on the desire to have these games released every year and the Pokémon Company's inability to adapt to the demand of modern game development. Don't criticize the developers for glitches or technical issues. Criticize the structure that gave them less than 2 years to develop a AAA game. An ugly tree or a flat-looking landscape may ultimately not mean much when it comes to actual gameplay, but they speak to a deeper issue, one that needs to be addressed. Because the Pokémon series as it is just can't be expected to continue indefinitely while maintaining the expected level of quality. It's just not realistic. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, share it with a friend, hit the like button, do all those things you do on the internet. Of course, consider subscribing to Nintendo World Report TV if you're not already, and hey, maybe ring the bell so that YouTube will actually tell you when we post something. You can find a whole lot more at NintendoWorldReport.com, and if you want to chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related, hop on over to our Discord. There's a link in the description. My name's John Reardon, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.